Ashling Smith Vance here again with another of our wonderful speaker series interviews for the NLP Global Summit. Today, I'm absolutely to be delighted to be joined by Damon Cart, all the way from Santa Cruz, California. Damon, you're so welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I appreciate it. My pleasure to be here.
It's wonderful to have you, and thank you for being part of the NLP Global Summit, continuing to spread the word of NLP around the world and giving us more places on the map of the world where our speakers are attending us live from. So we want to learn a little bit more about you, Damon. So please tell our members who you are and how you got your start with NLP.
Like you mentioned, my name is Damon Cart, and it feels like NLP kind of was popping up from time to time throughout my life, and I wouldn't say I ignored it, but I didn't go for it until I would say much later in my life. And how it would pop up is my dad was very much into personal development, and at one time he got into Tony Robbins, and that's probably the first time that I heard about NLP. And then later, when I was doing a college course, I had a professor who taught the philosophy of psychology, and he taught hypnosis, and eventually he taught some NLP. And I talk more about this in my presentation, but it was really a moment that I had with that professor who after I had finished college, I fell into a depression and I felt like he could help me. And so I reached out to him, and in one session, the depression was gone and he used NLP. And I remember thinking to myself, I really need to learn this stuff someday, but I was focused on a different career. Later, about 10 years later, I found myself in another depression, and I went to a traditional therapist, and it took a year to come out of my depression. So a year versus 1 hour, quite a difference. And it was at that point that I realized that this traditional therapist was not going to get me further along. Like he just kind of like he knew how to get you out of the hole. And then once you were out, like he couldn't really get me to the next step. And I realized at that point that my mental health was something I was going to have to take control over and not leave it up to a therapist who I see every once in a while. And also, I just knew that if I didn't do anything different, I was going to end up right back in his office again and going through the whole process. And I was like, okay, so how do I prevent this? And Santa Cruz, I didn't realize this until I was on my way en route from Los Angeles to moving to Santa Cruz, that Santa Cruz is where NLP started. And I thought when I got here that there would be NLP everywhere, and there wasn't. And but I did find out that there was one training every summer through what they called NLP University, and it was at the campus, the UCSC campus, where NLP was created. And it was Robert Dilts and Judith Delosier, two of the early developers, or two of the original developers who would put on this training. I didn't know this about them. I was just like, okay, well, here's the closest NLP training. I'm going to go do it. And that first practitioner training, like something just clicked. And I was there for my mental health, and I was there to fix my insurance business. I wasn't there to be a coach or a teacher, but I knew once I took that first training, something was going to be different from that point on. And sure enough, it was. And it really rerouted the course of my life at that point.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Such a wonderful story, David. I love it because you learned about, you knew the Tony Robbins stuff, which is so inspiring, and so much of what he does is based on NLP. And then you like just throughout your life, you just kept getting dipped into it a little bit, didn't you? So the clues are always there, and you just had to eventually find it. And I agree with you. When I did my NLP practitioner training, I knew that's it. I'm training this stuff. I'm building a training company, and this is where I'm going, because I'm like, everybody needs to know this. This is just it. Yeah. It's wonderful stuff. So you mentioned a little bit in your about what you're going to be covering in your presentation. So what are we going to learn from your presentation at the NLP Global Summit?
What you're going to learn is what I wish I knew when I first was getting into NLP, and that is how to bring it all together. Uh, my first training, it just felt like, and you probably had this feeling too, that like it's all in pieces, it's all sort of scattered everywhere. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. There's just pieces everywhere. And how do you really bring it all together? What I did was, because I was fascinated with NLP and I just loved it and couldn't get enough of it, I just did, after that first practitioner training, I just did one training after another and even did some hypnosis training. And it was sort of coming together, but not quite. And I
Mm.
hit a plateau a few years later. And this was already when I had decided to leave my insurance business behind and become an NLP teacher and a coach. But I was
Mhm.
still sort of struggling, and everything up until that point that I learned, it seemed like it got me, it jumped, it advanced me a lot further, but then it seemed to stop, and I couldn't figure it out. And they say whenever the student is ready, the teacher arrives, and this is when Steve Andreas sort of serendipitously popped into my life
Oh.
and offered to help me. And I was like, wow, okay, this is exactly what I needed at the right time. And we started talking, and I just had one question after another, and he couldn't keep up with them by email. So he would say, well, let's Skype. And then I would Skype, and then hours would pass. And he was like, Damon, I'm hungry and I'm tired. I gotta, I gotta get off the call. And I was like, oh, sure. Yeah. So I was after something.
Yeah.
And eventually he sort of figured it out, and it was good because I didn't know what I was really after, but he did. And he said, I think this is what you want. And he said, I created this model called the self-concept model. Go learn that model. He wrote a book called Transforming Yourself, where he outlines that model. And I grabbed the book and started reading it, and right away I started having these transformations, because
Oh.
it's a model that models the identity. And so once you know how you create your sense of self, then you can transform into the you want to be.
Wow.
And so I started reporting back to him, this is what I'm doing, and this is what happened. And he was like, well, you're doing it. Keep going, keep doing it. And eventually he said, you may want to teach this because I'm retired. And I said, it just seemed too big. I was like, I don't know if
Mm.
I can teach this. And the strange thing about it all is this was exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for something that no one else was teaching, something that was extremely powerful, something that would
Yeah.
distinguish me from my teachers, because I was trying to do workshops, and essentially I was competing with my teachers, and they were well established and I wasn't.
Yes.
And this was a strange thing. It just seemed like this model was too big for me to teach. And he's like, no one else is teaching it. You're getting it, and I'm retired. If you don't do this, there's probably not going to be anyone else who's doing it. And so I said, give me a few more months. Let me work with it. Let me start using it with clients and see if the same thing happens. And I'll let you know what I decide. And I just kept having one transformation after another. And as I was doing that, my life has started changing rapidly. The plateau was gone. And I started using it with clients, and the same thing started happening with them. And not only did I realize that this was now a calling, something I had to do,
Mm.
I started to realize how much better I understood NLP from a very holistic perspective. Before, it was sort of like, okay, I'm going to work with a client, or I'm going to work with myself, and I'm just going to kind of throw every technique and process I have at it until something works. And that was still years later, that's kind of what I was still doing. I mean, I had a better intuition about what would work, but it was still felt very sloppy and just sort of throwing everything at it. Now I was very tuned in to just listening to someone. I could sort of just tell right away, okay, this is where the problem is. Or even with myself, when I worked through some of my own problems, it just brought NLP all together in a way that I finally understood it from a holistic level, not just from a point and shoot in every direction until something works, but really understanding how it all comes together, how we perceive this subjectivity, how we're creating it, how we're creating our experience of our reality. And the more you could understand this, the more you can change it. And
Yeah.
so that really came together with understanding this model.
Wow. Wow. That model sounds amazing. So you're going to be getting into more detail about that model then in your presentation so we can learn. I'm
Yes.
very excited. Wow, that sounds absolutely amazing. I am as a coach, so separate to my training business at the Institute, I focus on purpose as a coach. So that's huge, and it's very much about deep diving into self and about helping my clients really discover what drives them inside and how they can follow their purpose because it can really be something that people struggle with. Now, would you agree, Damon?
That purpose is something people struggle with all the
Mm,
time. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
It was definitely something that I struggled with because when I was growing up, I was brought up in a very strict religious family.
Mm,
And they basically told me, if this is your purpose, this religion is your purpose. And
mhm,
without this religion, you're not going to have a purpose.
yeah.
And by the time I was 16, I had seen enough not good things, and I saw enough hypocrisy in the religion and the people who were a part of it. And I was
Mm,
like, you know what, you guys don't have it either. So
mm,
I was done. I walked away from it, and I just thought that purpose was something that you kind of make up and you just kind of go for it. And then in some
yeah.
cases, some people, they are just really bought into, like, this religion or this whatever it is that gives them some sense of purpose. The closest up until that point of purpose that I had felt was when my kids were born. And so I felt like, well, this role as being a father was a purpose, but it still didn't fully connect with me. Like, I mean, yes, I felt like a father, and that was a purpose, a role that I needed
Hmm.
to play. But it didn't go to like who I really was. It's like a deep
As a
seated,
person.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was learning a lot of the values work. I learned, how to elicit values in NLP
Mm,
trainings, and I was always wondering why they never took that any further, any deeper. It seemed like there was a lot of value in it, but then they just kind of would stop once you know your values. It's like, okay, you know your values.
but what else?
And
Yeah.
what's that?
But what else is there? What else? How much
Yeah,
further can you go? Yeah.
and it was around this time. So, like in the self concept model, what Steve taught was what creates self esteem, and what creates self
Mm,
esteem is when you align your behavior with one of your values, your self esteem goes up. If you value
mm,
kindness, if you act in a kind way, your self esteem will go up.
yes.
Now, it could just go up temporarily though, because you might not believe you are, in fact, a kind person. Like, you might not believe it fully that that's who you are, which means your self esteem can waver. And when you're not behaving directly in a kind way, your self esteem can actually drop back down if you don't believe you're a kind
Yeah.
person. So, this is something that is taught in
Yeah.
the self concept model. So, we look to find qualities that we value and transform them into certain and solid qualities. And then the more you do that, the more your self esteem goes up and sustains itself.
Yes.
So around this time, I was also curious about Steve's son, Mark, and I asked him to introduce us. So he did. And the more I got to talking to Mark, the more I realized that he didn't really know the self concept model. He favored his mother's work, Connie Ray Andreas's model of core transformation. And I had never
Oh,
learned that one either. So so I said to him, I said, do you want to come to Santa Cruz? I'll host you and you can teach core transformation. He said, yeah, definitely. So brought him here, and that was one of my strategies. I used to hire teachers to come here to Santa Cruz, and a lot of teachers would want to train here because NLP was created here.
yes.
And so I would host them, and I would get to learn
Mm,
whatever they were teaching. So same thing with Mark. I brought him in, and I learned core transformation, and that model elicits your values, and then does a hierarchy of those values, and then brings it through to so that you have that core transformation based on your values. And when I
mm,
saw that, I was like, wow, it's the first time I've seen a model where they took the values elicitation to the next level. And I
yeah.
thought, well, how could I combine this with self concept? And so the more
Mm,
I got to thinking about it, it's like, okay, well, if the more you value a quality, when you transform into that quality, the higher your self esteem goes.
mm-hmm,
Well, then I should be eliciting my values, my highest values from like
mm,
various areas of my life, and then do a hierarchy and then go with the highest value first and transform that as a quality. Because I went to Steve and I said, like, when it comes to your qualities, you just kind of like grab whatever you want off the shelf and transform into it. And he was like, yeah, pretty much. And I didn't like that answer. I
wow.
wanted to be more methodical about it.
Yes, yes.
So then I started doing that. I started listening my values, and then I would do a hierarchy of those values, and I would start from the top. Well, before I'd even start transforming anything, I would go through the values and ask myself, am
Mm,
I whatever the value was as a quality of who I am?
yes.
And then for all of them, I wasn't. I felt very
Mm,
uncertain about all of these things. And so I went one by one and transformed them into certain and solid qualities. And not only did my self esteem go up, but I, for the first time, felt a deep inner sense of purpose and meaning in my life that I had never felt before. And I just really did not think that it was going to come from this. In fact, I had kind of given up on that sort of deep sense of purpose and meaning, that it was just sort of like, you just kind of make it up as you go. But no, when you are, when you become the values that you value as qualities of who you are, then it's just there and there's no escaping it. It's just there and you
Yeah.
don't need to look for it outside of yourself. And so I went back to Steve and reported back what I had
Wow.
done. And he said, I'm not surprised that it worked. Keep doing it. And that's, a little piece that you've added to this, and keep doing it, keep teaching it this way.
Mm.
And so that was my
Wow.
little contribution
You
to
made
it.
it your own. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
exactly like you
that
told
well,
me
that's
to.
important too. Yeah.
Yeah. The funny thing is that so when I brought Mark, his son, and over, and I started talking to him about the self-concept model, and I realized that he hadn't learned it.
Mm.
And he was like, "Well, can you tell me about it?" I was like, "This is too weird. I'm telling your dad created it, and I'm the one who's going to tell you about it." But anyway, so we had conversations around it, and then about a year later, I brought Mark back because I was teaching a practitioner training, and I wanted Mark to be a part of it. And one of the first things he told me when he got back over here was, "Hey, I learned the self-concept model." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." I was like, "What made you decide to finally learn it?" And he goes, "Well, you wouldn't shut up about it, so I figured it was important." So I went ahead and learned it.
Oh, that's so good. Well, there you go. Isn't it funny? He had the opportunity to be exposed for his whole life and then decided just to,
Yeah.
yeah. So clearly you're a good advocate for it. I'm looking forward to that presentation. I can't wait to learn more about it. It sounds very, very intriguing and something that we all should, because, like I say, I have particularly our students when they come through and they want to become coaches, but they don't know what to do next, or what's my purpose, what's my niche, how do I get into that. So I really, with Len, so much of it is self-confidence, self-esteem, what, as you know, what helps you to create that, and always looking for new ways to help people to get to where they want to go in the fastest possible way, not wanting a year for therapy, right? One session versus 1 year. That's the difference, is really helping people get to where they want to be. And I think that's what one of the things as to what is so powerful about this summit is that there are so many amazing trainers from all over the world who have their own modalities that they're sharing, and obviously everything is a derivative of NLP, or utilizing some of the tools of NLP. And I think that in and of itself will be inspiring to those in attendance, that you can learn new things within the remit of NLP, and that these trainers who are presenting, you can go to them and learn these different modalities, and add them to your toolbox,
Yeah, for
which
those
is important.
yeah, for those who are listening, and I'm referring to Mark. Mark is on the summit, so if you're curious about Mark, you can find him here as well.
That's good. Yeah. So tell me, why is it important for you to be part of the summit, Damon?
I am always looking to share this with as many people as possible, and so any group or organization, any NLP or group or organization that is wanting to do what you guys are doing and spread the word, and I like the fact that you're reaching out and offering this platform for different teachers. I mean, that's really important because certain teachers will speak to you in a certain way. Certain teachers
Mm,
you'll connect with in a certain way, and some teachers you might not connect with, and that doesn't mean you won't get good information from them. But it's in the variety and the diversity. One of my first teachers, Judith Delosier, told me that you're never going to find it all in one teacher. That it's a diversity. You get a more dimensions of what NLP is
mm,
when you hear from a variety of teachers. So seeing that you guys were doing this, and that you were nice enough to invite me to be a part of it, I was like, yeah, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't
yeah.
I do it?
Well,
Yeah,
thank you for being here. And I love that. I love it's about layering the learnings. That was one thing that one of my first trainers, said to me, was about, just getting information from lots of different sources, and some will be the same, or they'll have similar accents within each of the trainings, and then you just put it all together,
mm,
and that's the thing that will make the difference for you as um as a trainer, moving forward as a as an NLP coach, or however you utilize, whether you're using it in business or just in your life. Everything that you learn from there might be just a nugget of gold, of wisdom that you take from any one of the presentations that you watch that will absolutely change your existing practice and take you to the next level. What would you say to any of those people who are maybe on the fence, Damon, and they're thinking about joining, but they're not quite sure?
Yeah, well, I would say, well, why not? What's stopping you? The thing is, if this is an interest, then follow that interest. There's something there, and for most people, they'll find when they get into NLP that it just really blossoms, and there's so much for so many different types of people, because it is about understanding your subjective reality, how you're creating it, how you can change it. So there's really something for everyone, and then you keep. I'm such a an advocate for anyone following their curiosity and following their interest. And that's all I did whenever it came to NLP. There was something there that I was curious about, that I was interested in. And to think that I might have passed that up there's no way I would be in the position that I am in now. There's no way that I would be as happy and fulfilled as I've become. I was fighting depression before.
Yes.
So if you have the least bit of curiosity or interest in this stuff, this is a great place to get started. Just jump in and hear from different teachers and find what you're looking for, because you will likely find it here.
Yeah. That's right. Yes. And that's the thing. It's like you may connect with one presenter over another. There's such a huge diversity of presenters from almost every country in the world. Like or at least they're either from one country and practicing in another country. So that we have a huge spread of the whole wide world covered. So even if you speak a different language, there's probably somebody who can train in your language as well. So we are looking forward to continuing to grow this NLP Global Summit year on year, and in the future do some live summits. So that will be exciting too. But for now, Damon, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing. I'm so excited to learn from your presentation, and it was so nice to hear about how you got involved with NLP in the first place. Wow, that's a really great story. But I do have one extra, like, bonus question that I like to throw in at the end of our interviews, and that is, what is your favorite NLP tool?
So when you say tool,
I'm talking about, and you touched on it so well earlier, that when you study NLP practitioner or master practitioner, you've got all of these things, and you just don't know how to pull it all together, because you've got values, and you've got parts integration, and you've got swish pattern, and you've got and some modalities, and so on and so forth. Do you find, because obviously we all work as coaches as well as trainers, or in working as a trainer, when you're delivering a practitioner training or a master practitioner training, is there something that you absolutely love training out, or that you love using with a client, because it's so simple that you just get results every time, regardless, or it's like a go-to, you can just absolutely do it in your sleep?
So it's hard for me to pick things apart and call out favorites. I think the challenge that I have with this, because when I think about the work that I do, both of myself and with clients, it's so put together, and it's like together. So I can break these things out, and so I'll break out some of the tools. I don't know if I can call out a favorite, but I'll say, okay. So there's the self-concept model, but I don't know if you could call that a tool, because it's a model, and it has a model with several tools in it. So value solicitation is where I start everything. If you've got to be clear about what your client wants, or what you want, if you want to pursue it. Fuzzy targets don't get hit. So if you don't fully understand on a deep level what you're really after, what value or values you're wanting to fulfill, good luck fulfilling it. And people will chase goals. Sometimes they will achieve them, and sometimes they won't. but without understanding the value that you really want to fulfill behind that, you can achieve a lot of things and feel empty.
Yeah.
And so, value solicitation is where it always starts for me.
Yes.
Uh, Conflict integration or overcoming resistance is another essential. Like
Yes.
once you are clear about what you want, then you want to know, well, what is stopping you from getting it? Because if
Mm.
you're just clear about what you want and there's no resistance to it, you will naturally gravitate to that. You will naturally step into it. Nothing will hold you back. That's what motivation is made out of. So there usually is something that's holding us back. And so you need to understand how to overcome that resistance. And so people use in NLP, they teach you the visual squash. There's a much faster way to go about that. So and having maybe like a limited amount of sessions with a client and then hitting resistance, I had to learn how to like help them overcome that very quickly and very conversationally, so that I
Mm.
feel like when I'm using NLP, the less the person knows about what I'm doing, the better, because then they can't resist. And so conflict integration is one of those things. It's just about finding what is the positive intention of the resistance, and then
Mm-hmm.
integrating that intention, that value into the bigger picture of what it is that you're doing.
Okay.
And then I would say the swish pattern is amazing for, it was what inspired Steve Andreas to create the self concept model, because when you swish
Oh.
that ideal image of yourself, he realized that that was a piece of identity work. So I rarely use the
Mm.
swish pattern whenever I'm um, working with a client, but there's an inspiration from that process that is undeniable, and that is a piece
Mm.
of identity work. And the more you
Okay.
can go really deep with that. Let me just put it that way. And then mapping across would be kind of the DNA of NLP. And so the more you understand mapping across, that's basically what all modeling is based on. So when it comes to your own change work, you basically can find areas of your life and parts of who you are that are working very, very well. And when you can understand those, and you elicit the structures of those, you can always map that across to anything in your
Yeah.
life and make it better. So
Yeah.
I don't know,
Amazing.
to answer your
Yeah. But
question, but
that's like 25 different tools. So
yeah.
anybody who's watching, taking notes, yeah, there's 25 core tools that you've just listed there. But that's that they are, yeah, they're phenomenal, and can be used in so many ways. Like I know that you're referring to, to specifically the framework model that we're discussing for your presentation, but individually they are great, all of the above on their own, just to help people to 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 live, to do life. It can be difficult enough to do life, but NLP certainly makes it easier. Damon, it's been
Tell
a
you
blast.
my I can tell you my favorite, most overlooked model in NLP that
Oh,
I think everybody should
yeah.
take the time to learn, and that's the meta model. I think most people skip
Yes.
over that because
Mm,
it's a little difficult to understand at first, and then it's not a very sexy model. It's language based, and unless you're really into language, it usually doesn't attract a lot of people. But somebody told me once that if you understand the meta model deeply and fully, you will
mm,
understand all of NLP, and from there you can basically make anything work. And that person was absolutely right.
yeah.
The meta model was the first model. It was even made before NLP was given the
Hmm.
name NLP, but
Yeah.
it holds keys to it all.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it is. Yeah, it is good. I really enjoy training it out, because I think, like, we run an NLP model of change, and it's just it's one of the core elements of change, understanding or utilizing the meta model to help your client loosen their grip on the
All the
problem.
time, and for
You
myself as
know.
well. And I even use it
Yeah.
with my kids. I use it with my wife.
Yes.
Like it's, oh, and it's
Well,
really good.
and but NLP, you don't know that you're using it, because it's just
Yeah,
part of,
it
it's just
becomes a
part of
part of you
your
for sure.
life. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And yeah, that's a story for another
Found
day.
it
Um,
extraordinarily good for debate as well, but that's a little more contentious. You're gonna probably break rapport in there. But if you want to become a good debater, the meta model is extraordinary for that
oh,
too.
there you go. Oh, well, look, we could probably go to all of the points of all of the amazing, because there's so many tools, like, after all. Um, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful talking to you. So interesting learning about your presentation, about your business, about your about your success in the industry, Damon. I really appreciate your time and your joining our summit. So hopefully someday we might see you over in Santa Cruz. And until then, we look forward to seeing you at the NLP Global Summit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.